I guess we're talking about Scrooge McDuck. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today I want to talk about some comic book, graphic novel things that I've read, really a series of comics that have been compiled into a linear story. And today's, comics are all about ducks and money. I am referring to The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, Volume 1, by Don Rosa, which was published in the 90s sometime. I forgot to write the certain date down, but I think these were collected over a series of years, but this volume was published in the 1990s. For those who don't know, Don Rosa is an American writer, white American writer. He mainly worked on creating comic books of notable Disney characters, Scrooge McDuck, Donald Duck, and Huey, Dewey, and Louis, the various characters of Duckburg. He's very well regarded for that, but eventually, due to aging and a number of other factors, such as unhappiness with the way Disney did business, he stopped writing and he's now in retirement, which is fair. I've been well aware of Scrooge McDuck and Donald Duck and those various characters for a while, but I didn't know that The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck existed until a friend pointed out, and based on their fervor and love of the series, I decided to check it out as well, and that seems to have been a good choice. So without further ado, let's talk about Volume 1. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck focuses on, of course, Scrooge McDuck. He is part of Clan McDuck in Scotland, and at the beginning of the story, we see a young Scrooge in around the 1880s, 1870s, being persuaded to restore the glory to Clan McDuck by accumulating wealth and prestige. And after earning his first dime, he promises that he's going to be square about everything and be tougher than the toughies and sharper than the sharpies, which is a fun phrase to say. He ends up sailing to America and goes to the Mississippi, where he encounters his uncle Pothole, who runs a riverboat. Eventually, he hears about a riverboat treasure and fights the Beagle Boys in order to claim that treasure. Unfortunately, the government ends up taking it away from them, but his uncle Pothole eventually gives him the riverboat business. It doesn't last very long, as the railroad business is taking off more, and so riverboats are falling by the wayside. So Scrooge heads to the west, becomes a cattle driver, working for a cattle driving business, and along the way he stumbles across a young Teddy Roosevelt who encourages him to be fair and square and enjoy the world around him, and Scrooge encourages him to get back into politics, which Teddy isn't really enjoying at the time. And then he is sort of given a fair amount of time in the cattle business, but eventually, because of homesteading, it's blocking off the cattle routes and the drive routes and whatnot. So he is fired from that job, works in a copper mine, manages to make a fair bit of money from that, only like $10,000, but he puts all that money to sending back to his family. Eventually, Scrooge McDuck returns home, his family very happy to see him, and he sort of restores Castle McDuck to its former glory, paying off a debt on it and allowing his family to keep it. Scrooge then returns to Africa to begin mining. He gets in a fight with a man named Flint Hart, who steals all of his things, but Scrooge manages to ride a lion back into town and get all of his stuff back. He heads to Australia and tries to find more gold there. Doesn't really have a lot of his success. He stumbles across an Aboriginal man who tells him about the dream tale, and Scrooge makes a lot of connections between himself and the mythical figures in that. And he also fights a bush ranger who's trying to steal his goods once again. And then he heads to Alaska for not Alaska, but the Alaska region for the Klondike Gold Rush. He stumbles across a man named Soapy Slick who ensnares him into bad interest terms for a loan on some mining equipment. But he does manage to find gold in a very secret place. And he starts hoarding that gold to himself, not really spending it, which the townspeople don't really like. And then Soapy tries to steal it from him. Scrooge manages to fight off those people, and then he learns that his mother died, so he heads back to his home. His family is once again celebrating that he now has a fair amount of money to his name. He started a lot of businesses, and he's doing well for himself. But Scrooge feels out of place in Scotland, and he encourages his family to move to Calisota. And he buys Fort Duxburg, which has been sitting empty, and he plans to store his gold in that place. The Beagle Boys show up again and try to steal his gold, but thanks to the American American Army trying to attack Fort Duxburg because due to a series of confusions or misunderstandings, like they believe that Scrooge is like an outsider or a spy or something like that. But it turns out that Teddy Roosevelt is now the president, so they managed to clear up that confusion, and the Beagle Boys are taken away. Scrooge's sisters insist on being taken along for their next trip, which Scrooge goes to Africa to make some more deals. They see that he's cheating the locals, giving like one person only a quarter for a diamond mine, and in another case, encouraging locals to beat up a bunch of other natives in an effort to get other rights, or like a rubber plantation or something like that. His sisters view this as despicable, and that he's kind of been changed by money, and so they decide to leave. Scrooge tries to catch up with them, but they manage to go back to Duxburg, and he intends to go back there, but he gets distracted by a number of other deals and other things he can do as he travels the world for the next 20 or so years. Scrooge becomes very bitter in that time, sees everyone is just trying to search for a handout, and it doesn't really take pity on anybody who might need it. And then he finally returns home. His sisters are very happy to see him and want to make amends. But again, Scrooge just hates everyone around him, and so they view him as like a sad case, someone who's been completely changed by money for the worst. But Scrooge does meet his nephew Donald Duck, who kicks him in the butt at that point. And then several years later, Scrooge also meets his nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie, as well as an adult Donald Duck, who Scrooge wanted to meet just to talk about the business and things like that. But before they can really, discuss anything, the Beagle Boys, his family, shows up and tries to rob them again, but they are successfully beaten back by Donald and Scrooge and the Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And then from there, Scrooge realizes, the true joy of life again. He comes to embrace his family and realize that obsessing over money is not worth it as much as what Teddy Roosevelt originally said about enjoying life and living, morally righteous. And so at the end of this, it appears that Scrooge has changed for the better. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about with the life and times of Scrooge McDuck. One of the things that I think Don Rosa is specifically talking about is the corrupting nature of money. Rosa shows that money and greed can create a lot of problems for you. You see the Beagle Boys just taking shortcuts and trying to steal money from everyone, including Scrooge at several points. Flintheart, leaves Scrooge stranded in Africa for a little bit, and even Soapy, Soapy Slick, he tries to steal Scrooge's gold claim out from under him, and constantly tries to exploit him at every turn. So it's very apparent that Scrooge is a victim of money at certain points. He's searching for money, but he keeps coming across these people who, are trying to find money in unscrupulous ways. And you would think you would learn a lesson from that in some way, that seeking money in this kind of way attracts weird people or causes a number of problems for yourself. But I do think that Scrooge spends so much time chasing money that he can't see it any other way, and that causes problems, and that he becomes corrupted in a number of ways. Because at the beginning of the story, you see him I'm going to work fair, I'm going to be square about everything, I'm going to be honest in my dealings. And you also see him very loving of nature and being happy to be in the world around him and caring for people a little bit. But that changes around the time of the Klondike Gold Rush, because he's been searching for a number of years and for his fortune, and he hasn't really found it yet. And so at a certain point he changes. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from that. "This frontier is like so many others I've known, unspoiled by the ravages of man, still glorious in its virginity. A man can face the world on his own terms here, enjoy the fruits of his own labor, live in a paradise of tranquility and beauty, and bah, sucker talk. When I find gold, I'll drain the creek with hydraulic mining, blast the mountains apart, and feed the trees to lumber mills." Which is a pretty devastating kind of quote there, because it gets at what Scrooge once was, and now where he is now. I think he's realizing only suckers play by the rules, which is not true. You should be playing by the rules because that's what makes a society function. But he's if I haven't received my fortune yet, and it's clear that only people who steal and pillage from others are going to make money, which again is not necessarily true, he decides, if you can't beat them, you might as well join them. And I think that's really interesting because it shows that change right there. It's slowly happening, but it's also very noticeable at that point. It doesn't feel out of place. It just shows what happens when you pursue money the whole time for, maybe not the noblest reasons. It's going to change you. And we see how else he has changed, because he begins ignoring his family, and he sees the world as exploit or be exploited. You see that in the Klondike Gold Rush, but when he builds his vault at Fort Duxburg, he begins to view other people as just wanting handouts. Some of these people need money, need help, because the world is a very tough place. If anyone can understand that, it's Scrooge, who's been around the world. But as he gets more money, he's oh, these people are only after one thing. Nobody wants to be my friend or something like that. And I don't think Scrooge is being very honest there. I don't think he's actually seeking friends. I think he's only seeking, because of the nature of his dealings, of course people are going to try to exploit him or cheat him or something like that. But he just assumes that's going to happen in every single case, which is not true, because his sisters definitely don't view him that way. And again, you might think true wealth comes from money or something like that. At least that's what Scrooge thinks. But as Theodore Roosevelt says, Teddy Roosevelt in this story says, true wealth comes from the joy of living, from being morally righteous, from being noble in your pursuits, being a square dealer, as Scrooge had pointed out in his youth. But he doesn't necessarily believe that, but once he meets his nephews as well as Donald Duck, he does change his worldview. He's oh yeah, life can be good and life can be full of adventure, and maybe that's what I'm missing. Maybe I've become a little bit too greedy and a little bit too focused on the money aspect of things instead of things that really matter. And so ultimately, he does kind of realize the ultimate message there. I will say, Rosa's not the first person to kind of say that message, but he is one of the better writers, illustrators to kind of show how greed can be, corrupting in that way. Rosa's also talking about the easy path versus actual hard work. Scrooge is initially encouraged to obtain wealth through square dealing. He says, I'll be sharper than all the sharpies, tougher than all the toughies, and I'll be a square dealer. I'll treat people fairly and give them what they deserve. And that's a very noble pursuit right there. It's very hard in this world, in this very corrupting world, to kind of be that square dealer. But there's a number of people in real life who have operated that way and done fairly well for themselves. And so I think what that is it's a rejection of quick wealth, which you see what Scrooge does early in the story. Like, he has that opportunity to make his money on the riverboat by getting the gold. And you see him thinking, like, do I really want to make my money that way? It's a little too easy. And even when he gets like the $10,000 offer, he initially rejects it until he finds out that his family kind of needs it for the castle. Being an honest worker, being a square dealer and getting things the hard way, like getting things the real way, kind of entails just rejecting those easy offers if you want to make your fortune. Although I would argue in today's world, maybe you should probably accept the easy money. But in a kind of fictional world where things are equal and a man has an opportunity to pursue his wealth, maybe you want to take that harder path. But I do think that failure beats down Scrooge. He fails for a number of years, not able to obtain his wealth. And so he begins looking for those shortcuts. He's like, I'm going to exploit the land. I'm going to cheat people. I'm going to give a guy a quarter who doesn't know any better. And that way it'll give me like a dime in mind. I'm going to take all of these little shortcuts because that's what other people would do. If the world isn't going to treat me fairly, I shouldn't treat the world fairly, which is a very bad mindset to have, because just because the world does it to you, that if you do it to them, that just makes it normal. But we can also see, this is clearly not normal, because his family reacts in horror the way he treats other people, and they're actively out of his life for a number of years because of the way that he's treating other people. So Rosa's very fairly pointing out, the best way to go about things is through hard work and also treating people fairly, doing square deals. The way that Scrooge thought of the world initially is right, and him deciding to take those shortcuts isn't the right thing to do after all. The last thing I'll note about this is I do like Scrooge's sort of descent into greed and uncaring sort of behavior. It feels very natural in here. Like, we see several instances of him trying to make his fortune, kind of being cheated out of it, or a variety of economic circumstances coming into play where he loses his job or something like that. And so, that kind of wears him down until finally he's just ready to say, yeah, I'll take the shortcut here. I'll exploit the land. I'll make a bunch of deals that might not be fair, but it certainly benefit me. And it feels very natural in that progression, not happening all at once, which is really great writing on Rosa's part. And the art is really good too, because you see Scrooge very happy in the beginning, and then he gets worn out and he's just angry all the time and very frustrated. It's particularly well done. Like, the aging of Scrooge is really what adds to the overall enjoyment of the story of this comic. So I do have to give Rosa and any other illustrators who are part of this credit for writing such a wonderful story here. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, Volume 1. I highly recommend it out there for anyone who wants to experience some of Don Rosa's work. It's a great place to kind of see that all in one location. I actually checked this out from another university libraries. I used interlibrary loan, which is always pretty cool. Definitely use that if your library doesn't have certain books or something like that. I'm recommending this. I don't intend to talk about Volume 2, although I did check it out. I'll probably just read it and not really comment on it unless there's something to say, maybe the year end or the end of the month kind of wrap up and TBR. I will pursue that. Maybe you can also pursue that if you want. But other than that, if you have anything to say about my review here, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this story or this writer, author, comic book illustrator if they don't know anything about him. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and duck-based travels. Farewell.